Hey everyone, this is Mike from the Comic Book Trove, back today with another video, and today I'm going to be taking a look at the Hulk Grey Gallery Edition by Jeph Loeb and Tim Sale. Now this is one of 4 gallery editions which are now available that collect each of these colour-themed stories by Loeb and Sale that they did for Marvel. On the channel already I've previously looked at the Spider-Man Blue book. Now I'm a huge fan of Spider-Man Blue, that's probably my favourite of all of these, but not too far behind it would be this one right here. Hulk Grey is a really nice story, and it's really cool to get it in this kind of hugely oversized format that these gallery editions are. So before we just go ahead and look at the book and I kind of go through that, let's just take a look at the design of this. So obviously we've got this kind of grey colour scheme which works and makes sense given the whole theme and name of the book. On the spine, pretty plain, just Jeph Loeb, Tim Sale and Hulk. On the back we have a bit of artwork and obviously a summary of the story itself and just the confirmation that it collects the full Hulk Grey miniseries, all 6 issues. Now, before I get going with this and talk about kind of specifically what's in here and what's good about it, I will give the usual spoiler warning because, you know, I will show stuff off and mention things I'm sure that you don't want to know about if you've never read this before and don't want any spoilers. So fair warning there. These books as well, these gallery editions, they are huge. You know, they're quite a lot taller than an omnibus. They won't fit in shelves, you know, quite as easily as they do. They need a bit of a special section that's going to hold a taller book. That's something to be aware of as well. Yeah, so this starts off with an introduction by Jeph Loeb. And this was done, I think, specifically for this gallery edition, as there was one done for Spider-Man Blue, and presumably for the other 2, Daredevil Yellow and Captain America White. It's dated 2023. It's really nice, really cool to get to, you know, that bit of insight into the origins of where the ideas came from to do these books. There's also a nice little tribute paid to obviously his collaborator Tim Sale in there, who did pass away not too long ago. And then we get into chapter 1 then, issue 1. Now this book, I quite like how this is sort of framed narratively. So we have a present day conversation going on between Bruce Banner and Dr. Leonard Samson. It's a sort of unofficial late night therapy session where these two are having a conversation about Bruce's past basically, and specifically about his wife Betty. Now, first major spoiler I'll talk about here is that this takes place not too long after Peter David's run. At the end of that run and during this time, Betty Banner had passed away, so she was dead in the comics. Now, she did, of course, come back in classic comics fashion later on, but at this point in time, yeah, she was dead. So this is a bit of a somber conversation, really, very reflective by Bruce Banner on the past, on his relationship with Betty, and specifically on meeting her. That's the point of this book, and in fact, all these coloured books, these colour-themed ones, you know, by Loeb and Sale, they tend to focus on the early years of the particular character in question, and usually with specific reference to a lost love or a lost significant person in their life. And in here, it's Bruce reflecting on Betty. So we go back to effectively the very beginning of the Hulk. So we start to see, you know, the first few issues of Hulk kind of reimagined through Tim Sale's artwork. And just as with Spider-Man Blue and Daredevil Yellow, it's not just literally reimagining stories we've already seen, but in sort of elaborating on them and adding a little bit more in there, sort of like an extended cut kind of thing, I suppose you could call it. But yeah, if you're familiar with your Hulk history, your early Hulk history especially, there will certainly be some familiar stuff in here. We get the classic story beats, of course, of Bruce Banner being in the gamma bomb accident that turns him into the Hulk in the first place. We've got him meeting Rick Jones, the introduction of Thunderbolt Ross and Betty, obviously, and a few other key events as well. For example, as was happening in those very early issues, there's this kind of cave in the desert that Bruce has Rick lock him in overnight. It's cool to see some of the throwbacks to those early Hulk ideas. But yeah, so the exploration here, as I say, is very much on Bruce and Betty, and, you know, Hulk and Betty as well, because as was established by this point, thanks in no small part to Peter David, I'll never miss an opportunity to praise Peter David's run and his contribution to the Hulk. You know, it was well established that the Hulk and the various versions of the Hulk, really, each kind of representing different repressed parts and elements of Bruce Banner's psyche and his personality. And at the very beginning here, it's kind of just that sort of simple-minded, brutish Hulk. But it's very kind of sweet. It's very much, you can see that Frankenstein monster type influence that Stan Lee and Jack Kirby took when they first created the character in the first place, and it's used here as well really well. He's got that kind of sweet innocence to him, almost childlike innocence. He feels the need to protect Betty, Hulk, but he doesn't really know why, and she has no idea who he is. She does not know at this point that Bruce is Hulk and vice versa. So as far as she's concerned, it's just this terrifying, giant, brutish monster kidnapping her in the middle of the night. And that's obviously the reaction that her father, Thunderbolt Ross, and everybody else has as well. So you get a classic story, really. Classic kind of army chasing the Hulk sort of story. You know, that's one that's been done plenty of times. But it all just works really well in here. And I think what Loeb and Sale did really well in all these colour books is the focus on characterization. You know, it's not so much the fights and the big events going on in here that drive the story. It's just looking back on previous significant parts of these characters' histories through a more sort of emotional lens, I guess you could say. Because each one of these books, you know, can be quite emotionally hard-hitting. They've definitely got their poignant moments, this one being no exception. I'm a big Hulk fan, so to me this is, you know, something I can't really recommend highly enough. And Tim Sale's artwork, you know, the big reason why you'd want to have a book like this collected in such an oversized format as these gallery editions provide, it's going to be for the artwork. So for me, as a big Tim Sale fan, you know, this is just beautiful stuff. Really like it. First came across his work, as I'm sure many people did, with the Batman Long Halloween, but not too long after that, I discovered all these, you know, these Marvel colour books, and just as much a fan as them, really. So really cool stuff, and the way he draws the Hulk is pretty unique. Never really seen the Hulk drawn quite that way. In the introduction by Jeph Loeb, he does actually talk a little bit about where Sale got the idea to draw him that way, and that's a pretty good story. Yeah, so some cool stuff happens because all this is being narrated, or kind of, it's all basically one big flashback with Bruce talking to Leonard in the present. And throughout the story, you get these kind of narrative boxes with, you know, one colour representing Bruce talking and one Leonard. So there's this event here which shows a fight between the Hulk and Iron Man in his original all golden bulky armour. But as Leonard points out, you know, that didn't happen in the original comics. You know, this is not the point in Marvel history where Hulk and Iron Man met for the first time. So you kind of get that element introduced as to whether or not Bruce Banner is an entirely reliable narrator anyway, you know, in the way he's telling this story. Is he over-exaggerating things, over-elaborating on things, or just outright making stuff up? And he stays kind of deliberately a little bit ambiguous on that, which is all pretty cool as well. You know, adds another element to it all. But I just really enjoyed this, you know, and it's something, like I say, if you're a Hulk fan, definitely worth checking out. I think all these Loeb and Sale colour books are really good, to be honest. Can't really go wrong with any of them. This is another good one to have, frankly. It's one I'm really happy to add to my collection. And, you know, I don't currently have Daredevil Yellow or Captain America White. Those are the two missing ones. I will probably get them at some point. And then if I do, obviously, I'll do a video on those too. But let me know what you think of Hulk Grey, because, yeah, as always, you know, I'm happy to hear the thoughts of others, whether or not other people kind of like this book and these other colour books as much as I do. But I think these are really nicely presented in these gallery editions in particular. You know, it's a cool way to have them. This book's obviously been collected in other ways before. There's been several trade paperbacks. There was an omnibus, actually, not that long ago that had all these books in it, all these Loeb and Sale stories. There's a cool bit of an extra section at the back as well. So, well, before we get to that, actually, just talk a little bit about the ending. Another spoilery moment. Kind of Bruce comes to the conclusion in the end that the only reason that Betty actually liked him and loved him was because, as the Hulk, as this monstrous character being the Hulk, he sort of reminded her of her father, who was a bit of a kind of monstrous person in a different way. Leonard tries to explain that things are not necessarily that black and white, that things can in fact be much more grey than that, and he's not necessarily coming away with the right idea. But before any of that can sink in, he turns into a very green Hulk at this point and leaps out of the roof, you know, in a kind of classic Hulk emotional reaction. Yeah, it's quite a somber ending. As I say, it's not a very fun story. You know, these aren't really meant to be super fun, light-hearted books. They definitely have their enjoyable moments, but you know, each of them kind of can be quite thought-provoking and poignant. In the back, there is this cool section where you see some early influences, some of the early artwork of Hulk, some Kirby Hulk, etc., Maurice Severin, and so on. different things that influenced the look of the book and how Tim Sale chose to kind of recreate some of this stuff. Classic panels, you know, you see the original and then the Tim Sale reinterpretation. I really like seeing stuff like that when artists are kind of paying homage to previous work. It's cool to see the specific kind of references that they used along the way, and you definitely get a good amount of that in here. But yeah, like I say, overall, just a really cool collection, and before too long, probably pick up the other coloured books as well. But thanks as always for watching. You know, that's appreciated as always, and I'll be back in soon to discuss something else.